Welcome to the Old America Podcast. I'm Mike.
I'm Madison.
Here, we uncover the hidden stories behind America's highways
and dive into the history of the disasters and events that shaped our nation.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the place you come to get past the headlines, dig into the sources, and really understand the story.
And today, we are definitely hitting the road. We're talking about U.S. Route 66.
Route 66. Instantly, you picture it, right? Shiny cars, maybe some Elvis tunes, neon everywhere, freedom, the open road, pure Americana.
That's the image, yeah. The classic 1950s vibe, chrome diners, desert sunsets, all that jazz. It's become this powerful symbol of leisure, of nostalgia.
Totally. The Mother Road, it just feels simple, almost uncomplicatedly American. But, that postcard view, the one on all the keychains and T-shirts, it kind of papers over a much rougher and honestly way more crucial origin story.
Exactly. That's our mission today. We're peeling back that shiny, nostalgic layer. We want to really focus on the years 1926 to 1945.
Right. Because during those 2 decades, Route 66 wasn't really about tourism yet. It was a product of intense political maneuvering. It was this fragile economic lifeline for struggling communities.
And then it became absolutely essential during 2 huge national crises, the Great Depression and World War II.
So we're looking at the road before the legend really took hold, back when it was just this, practical tool, a means of development, sometimes survival, stretching almost 2,400 miles.
Chicago all the way out to L.A., cutting through 8 states. It wasn't built for fun back then. It was built for function. So yeah, let's dig into that history.
Let's do it.
Okay, so to really get why Route 66 even happened, you have to picture what American roads were like before 1926. I mean, people had cars, right? The Model T was everywhere.
Oh yeah, people were moving.
Yeah.
But the roads themselves, it was... chaos seems like the right word.
It really was. Imagine you're trying to drive, say, from Chicago towards California. You could literally see the same stretch of road called 10 different things in one day, or, sometimes no signs at all.
And who was in charge? It was just this messy mix of, local counties, maybe state efforts sometimes, completely disconnected roads.
Yeah, thousands of miles of disconnected bits and pieces, and the quality, wildly different. You'd go from pavement maybe to graded dirt to just ruts. No standards for how wide it should be, how steep the hills were.
Just a total mess. Unworkable for a country trying to grow, trying to industrialize.
Absolutely unsustainable. So the federal government finally steps in and says, look, we need a system, a standardized, numbered U.S. highway system. This is about commerce. It's about moving the military if needed. It's about, national unity, efficiency.
And this is where our main character enters the story, Cyrus Avery. You can't talk early Route 66 without talking Avery.
Definitely not. He was this really energetic guy from Tulsa, Oklahoma, an oil man, businessman, deeply involved in state politics as the Oklahoma Highway Commissioner. They called him the father of Route 66, and honestly, he earned it.
So he gets picked for this big national committee, right? The Joint Board on Interstate Highways.
Yep. One of only 21 guys tasked with mapping out this whole new federal system. Now, most of the board, they were thinking straight lines, east-west, connect the big cities. Logical lines like US 30 or US 80 would eventually become...
Makes sense. Follow the lines of latitude, basically. Connect the big dots.
But Avery, he had this, much bolder idea, a diagonal route, cutting southwest right through the heartland.
Okay, so Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. Why fight for that zigzag when everyone else wanted straight lines?
It was smart, really. 2 main reasons, economics and politics. His diagonal route deliberately went through areas the straight paths would totally ignore. We're talking hundreds of mostly rural towns, places kind of cut off geographically.
Places that needed a connection.
Exactly. Connecting them to Chicago, which was this huge transportation hub for the Midwest. Suddenly, farmers in Oklahoma or Kansas could get their grain, their produce to market way easier. It was about sparking economic life in these underserved areas.
And it wasn't just about farmers, was it? There was another industry booming.
Oh yeah, trucking? By 1930, trucks were already huge, seriously competing with the railroads for moving freight across the country.
And Avery saw that coming.
He absolutely did. His proposed diagonal path, especially cutting through Oklahoma and Texas, it was mostly flat prairie land. And crucially, it avoided the really harsh winters you got on the northern routes. Less snow, less ice.
Made it way more reliable year-round.
Perfect for trucks. So this route was ideal for the growing freight industry. That became a massive strategic advantage for Route 66 way before anyone was thinking about World War II convoys.
And Avery knew his stuff, didn't he? He wasn't just some politician drawing lines on a map. He'd been involved in the Good Roads movement back in Oklahoma.
Yeah, he understood the nuts and bolts of actually building and maintaining roads, especially on a budget. Back when he was working in Tulsa County, they didn't have money for fancy engineering.
So what did he do?
He pushed this method called the split log drag. It sounds incredibly basic.
Okay, break it down. What is a split log drag?
It's literally what it sounds like. You take a log, split it down the middle, hitch the two halves together, maybe a few feet apart. Sometimes they'd weigh it down with rocks, or the driver would just stand on it.
And they'd pull this thing with horses.
Or tractors.
Yep. Pull it along a dirt road, especially after it had been graded, or if it was wet clay like you get a lot in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It did two key things. First, it smoothed out the ruts and bumps.
Okay, makes sense.
But more importantly, it kind of pushed the dirt or clay slightly towards the middle of the road. It created this gentle slope, a crown.
Ah, so the water runs off.
Exactly. Kept the road from turning into a total mud bog every time it rained. It was cheap, it worked, and you could do it locally. Avery knew how to make bad roads passable.
So he takes that practical, can-do attitude to the national level. Which brings us to the big fight over the number, getting 66.
Oh, the number fight. That was pure political theater. See, the most important highways, the big transcontinental ones, they get the numbers ending in 0 or 5. Think US 10, US 40, US 60.
Those were the prestige numbers?
Yeah.
Meant more federal money, right?
Shit.
Absolutely. More prestige, more funding priority. So Avery initially went for US Route 60 for his diagonal dream.
But other states wanted that number.
Oh, yeah. Kentucky and Virginia, mainly. They lobbied hard. They wanted US 60 for their own route, running east-west from Virginia Beach out to Missouri.
Why were they so against Avery's route?
They were worried his diagonal path cutting southwest would basically suck all the traffic and all the future development money away from their east-west highways. They saw it as a direct threat to their regional economies.
No doubt, nasty.
It got pretty heated, yeah. It was high stakes, big money, political clout. In the end, Avery actually lost the fight for the number 60.
So he didn't get what he wanted.
Not the number 60. But as a compromise, they assigned him U.S. Highway 66 in 1926. Still a double digit, still marked it as a major road.
So maybe not the most prestigious number, but he got the route itself, the diagonal path.
That's the key. He won the route. He got that connection for the Heartline build. It really shows his personality, you know. Apparently his family had faced financial disaster way back, and it taught him to just never let obstacles stop him. He brought that same energy to getting this road approved.
Okay, so 1926, the map officially shows Route 66. The number's there, the path is agreed on, but if you were actually driving it back then, well, it wasn't exactly the smooth ride we picture today, was it?
Oh, smooth is definitely not the word. Stark is maybe better. You got to remember, Route 66 in 26, it wasn't some brand new highway built from scratch.
Right, you said it was cobbled together.
Exactly. It was just a number slapped onto a corridor that already existed, more or less. They basically linked up whatever county roads, state routes, old trails were already there. It was just this jumble.
A mix of
Dirt,
gravel.
Dirt, gravel, graded earth. Maybe, if you were lucky, a short stretch of concrete near a big city. But mostly, not paved.
So picture me driving from Chicago in, say, 1927. What's that trip actually like?
It would have been jarring. Constantly changing road surfaces. 1 minute you're on decent state road, the next you're bouncing over packed earth. It took 12 full years.
12 years, just to get it all paved.
Yep. Not until 1938 was the entire 2,400 miles continuously paved. And where you were made a huge difference. The condition varied wildly state by state.
And you can really see the difference between the more industrial states and the more rural West in the sources, can't you?
Massively. Illinois, being richer and more developed, moved fast. They had their whole stretch paved by 1929.
Wow.
Kansas only had a tiny piece of 66, like 13 miles, but they got it done quickly, too, supposedly entirely concrete. Missouri was doing okay, maybe 2/3 paved, but Oklahoma, only about a quarter of its section was considered improved.
But the real challenge, the big gap, was out west.
That huge stretch, 1,200 miles across Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and then into Southern California, that was the Western Gap.
Why was it so bad there?
These were vast states, sparsely populated, and frankly pretty poor historically. They just didn't have the tax base or the resources for major road building back then. Until the New Deal money started flowing later, that entire western half saw almost no modern highway construction.
How little are we talking?
Get this. Outside of the cities, across that entire 1,200-mile western stretch, the sources say there were only about 64 miles of actual surfaced highway combined.
64 miles.
Yeah.
Paved. Over 1,200 miles of route.
That's what the sources indicate. So yeah, the vast majority was dirt, gravel, or just roughly cleared trails. If you were driving west from Chicago, you ran out of pavement pretty quickly.
And paving wasn't cheap, right?
Yeah.
What did it actually involve back then?
No, it was a serious investment, around $22,000 per mile, which was a ton of money then. And that covered everything. Grading the land to make it less hilly, putting in culverts and ditches for drainage so it wouldn't wash out.
Widening it too, I bet?
Yep. Widening it to a consistent federal standard, usually about 20 feet. And then finally putting down a surface, sometimes macadam, which is like oiled gravel. Or if you were really lucky, concrete.
So that sounds absolutely brutal for travelers. You mentioned that section in Arizona, Ash Fork to Seligman.
Yeah, that quote is amazing. In the mid-1920s, someone described that section as, and I quote, unimproved except in the way of removing boulders.
Removing boulders. That wasn't even a road. It was an obstacle course.
Pretty much. Driving it was just this slow, grinding, car-destroying ordeal. 20 miles per hour would have felt fast. People blew tires constantly. Axles broke. It was not a pleasure cruise.
And yet, even with these terrible conditions, the road immediately started having an economic impact.
It did, almost instantly. Even as this messy patchwork, just having the number assigned, just the idea that Route 66 was going to channel traffic through these formerly isolated towns, it was enough.
People saw the potential.
Yeah, local entrepreneurs jumped on it. You saw the very first wave of roadside businesses pop up. Really basic stuff, little shacks selling gas, maybe some food, extremely minimal lodging. They were betting on the future, betting that traffic would come. Even if the road itself wasn't quite ready for prime time, it meant outside money coming into their communities.
Okay, so the road exists. It's rough, but it's there. Then the 1930s hit, and everything changes. The Great Depression, which kind of weirdly ends up being the thing that finishes the road.
It's definitely ironic, isn't it? The Depression provided both the reason creating jobs and the means massive federal spending to finally get Route 66 paved from end to end.
This is where the New Deal programs come in big time.
Absolutely critical. You had the WPA, the Works Project Administration, and the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Building and improving roads was a huge part of what they did. It basically turned highway construction into this giant federal jobs program.
You called it a monolithic effort in the outline. That feels right. This was enormous.
It really was. From about 1933 to 1938, you had literally thousands upon thousands of unemployed young men, mostly single guys, shipped out to work on these road gangs.
Living in camps.
Yeah, temporary camps often run with almost military-style discipline. Their whole job was building public works, roads, bridges, parks, and Route 66 was a major focus.
And that's how, by 1938, the entire 2,400 miles finally got paved. Continuous, all-weather pavement from Chicago to L.A., a massive government achievement, really.
And, of course, this is the era that gets tangled up with the Dust Bowl story. John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath, comes out in '39, and bam, Route 66 becomes the mother road.
The path of desperation, families fleeing the dust, heading west, hoping for a better life. That's the image burned into everyone's mind.
It's a powerful image, and it certainly happened. Those migrants, the Okies and Arkies, they definitely used the road, and their journey definitely boosted business for those little roadside places that had sprung up.
But the sources suggest we need to be careful about the scale, right?
Yeah.
The story sometimes gets exaggerated.
It does seem that way. While the migration was real and tragic, the numbers often get inflated in popular memory. Some sources suggest maybe only around 16,000 people from the actual Dust Bowl regions ended up settling permanently in California via Route 66 during that specific period.
Okay, 16,000 is still a lot of people moving, but maybe not the overwhelming flood we sometimes picture.
Right. And here's the really fascinating contrast, the kind of thing we look for in a deep dive. Who was actually on the road more during those years? The desperate families fleeing the dust, or the guys hired by the government to build the road?
You're saying the road workers might have outnumbered the migrants.
It's very possible, even likely, when you look at the sheer scale of the WPA and CCC. Hundreds of thousands of Americans worked on federal relief projects during that time, so the programs building and fixing Route 66 probably had a direct economic impact threw wages on far more people than the number who actually used it for the famous Dust Bowl migration.
Wow, so the government was literally employing people to build hope while other people were traveling on it looking for hope. That's quite a picture.
It really is. And that freshly paved road, finished in 38, it was completed just in the nick of time because the very next chapter is World War II.
And Route 66 instantly shifts roles again, from a Depression recovery project to a vital artery for national defense.
And you can actually trace the military's interest in good highways way back. There's a key figure here, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Like, what's his connection?
Well, years earlier, when he was just a young captain, long before Route 66 was paved, he was part of this huge military convoy trying to cross the country, and they got completely stuck, bogged down in spring mud somewhere near Fort Riley, Kansas.
Just couldn't move the trucks and equipment.
Total logistical nightmare. And that experience, seeing how bad roads could paralyze the military, apparently left this indelible impression on him. It's one of the things that fueled his push for the interstate highway system decades later. But Route 66, that became the proving ground during the war.
Because once the U.S. enters the war after Pearl Harbor, the West becomes this massive training ground, right?
Huge. All that wide open space, the geographic isolation, the dry weather, perfect for bombing ranges, airfields, army bases. Arizona alone saw something like $230 million in military construction investment.
And Route 66 was the road connecting it all.
It was the essential link. It ran right by or near major installations like Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, the huge Navajo Ordnance Depot in Arizona, Edwards Air Force Base out in California. It moved troops, equipment, everything heading towards the Pacific.
And it wasn't just military traffic. You mentioned the trucking industry earlier. The war changed things for them, too.
Big time. The War Department basically took over the railroads for moving troops and the really heavy equipment. That left a massive gap in hauling everything else, parts, supplies, materials for war production.
And the trucks filled that gap.
Completely, especially out west. Studies from 41 to 43 showed trucks were hauling at least half of all the defense-related stuff going to the factories and ports. And Route 66 was the shortest, most direct, all-weather route between the industrial Midwest and the West Coast.
So you'd see actual military convoys.
Oh, yeah. Sources talk about mile-long convoys of Army trucks rumbling down Route 66, moving troops and supplies, 247. It put incredible strain on that new pavement.
But beyond the military, the road played another huge role during the war, moving people, workers.
This is maybe the biggest, least told story of Route 66 during the war. It facilitated what some sources call the single greatest wartime mobilization of labor in U.S. history.
How so?
The government poured insane amounts of money, like $70 billion in 1940s dollars, into war production on the West Coast. Shipbuilding, aircraft manufacturing, munitions, mostly in California, places like LA and San Diego.
And they needed millions of workers for those factories.
Millions. Estimates say up to 10 million workers needed to relocate nationally for war jobs. And the existing trains and buses, they just couldn't handle that volume of people moving all at once.
So how did people get there?
The government, specifically the Public Roads Administration, basically said, well, most of them are going to have to drive in their own cars.
So Route 66 becomes the main highway for this massive wave of job seekers heading west.
It was the primary artery, and the result was this incredible population boom on the West Coast. Between 1940 and 1943, the populations of California, Oregon, and Washington state shot up by almost 39%. Compare that to the national average growth of less than 9%.
Wow, so the road literally reshaped the demographics of the West.
Absolutely. It turned the West Coast from kind of a collection of frontiers into this booming, urbanized industrial powerhouse almost overnight, all thanks to the war effort and the road that could get people there. You know, to really capture the feel of that time, the war years, when the road was all about work and necessity, we found this great piece. It's designed to sound like someone who was actually there on the road in the 1940s.
Yeah, this isn't about kicking back and enjoying the drive. This is the sound of the road when it was a lifeline, when getting to your destination was everything. Let's have a listen. Voice of Traveler. It was always loud after 41. The roar of the trucks day and night hauling loads over 30,000 pounds. The vibration went right through the floorboards of the diner. That pavement, the stuff the government boys finished just before the war, they called it all weather. And Lord, were we thankful for it. It meant the difference between a 3-day trip and being bogged down in Oklahoma mud for a week. You packed everything in the sedan, or maybe a beat-up pickup. You didn't stop to sightsee. You were trying to make time, make distance. If you missed your shift at the plant in San Diego, that job was gone. When you saw a light, that's where you stopped. It was usually a hand-painted sign, sometimes just nailed to a telephone pole, a low-capital mom-and-pop joint selling gasoline that might be 50 miles fresher than the last place. They often looked like they had just thrown up a few concrete blocks overnight and slapped some slab rock veneer on the front. No standardization at all. But they were open because they knew you were coming. They needed your 50 cents for the hamburger and coffee as much as you needed the fuel and the relief. The smell was distinct. Hot asphalt, dry desert dust, and a thick, sweet odor of diesel and motor oil from the convoys that owned the road. You'd pass them for miles, slow-moving, mile-long processions of olive-drab trucks heading west with equipment and young boys from back east. Everyone was moving. Not tourists, not usually. Laborers, mechanics, welders, men and women heading west because the government invested $70 billion in California, and those defense jobs were the only sure thing left. You had all these folks in their private cars, often packed 7 or 8 deep, driving west for a war they wouldn't fight with a gun, but with a wrench or a rivet gun. That road, that continuous stretch of pavement, was the shortest path to hope. It connected the Midwest where the factories were to the West where the work was. You didn't feel lazy freedom out there. You felt urgent necessity. You felt the sheer scale of a country moving, mobilized, searching for the next paycheck, and praying the tires and the engine held out for one more 100 miles. That road was a worker itself. Voice of traveler.
Wow. That really brings it home, doesn't it? That sense of urgency, the noise, the sheer functionality of the road, it hammers home that Route 66 in this critical period was absolutely a working road for working people.
Yeah, the legend, the culture we celebrate now, it was really forged in that necessity, not in leisure time. And what's so interesting is that the very things that made it functional back then, all those independent, low-budget businesses, are what created the unique character we love today.
Exactly. There was no big corporate chains stamping out identical motels or gas stations. It was all small-scale entrepreneurs building what they could afford, trying to grab the attention of drivers whizzing by. That led to this amazing, eclectic mix of buildings.
All designed around the absolute basics for a traveler. Gas, food, a place to sleep.
Right. And you can actually see the evolution of lodging along the route as the road improved and people had maybe a little more money or expectations changed.
So it started way back with just city hotels.
Yeah.
Which weren't very convenient if you were driving through.
No, you had to detour into town. So then you got the really basic auto camps. Sometimes just a fenced-off field where you could pitch a tent or sleep in your car, maybe a water pump and an outhouse if you were lucky.
Primitive.
Very. Then came tourist homes, which were often just spare rooms people rented out in their own houses along the route.
Getting slightly better.
A little. Then came the dedicated cabin camps or cottages. These were huge, small, separate little cabins. Think John's modern cabbies in Missouri, often built with local materials like that slab rock. You got privacy, and crucially, you could park your car right outside your door.
And the wigwam motels fit in here, right? With the rooms shaped like teepees.
Perfect example. Totally unique, high concept, individual places trying to stand out. That's peak early roadside architecture.
And then eventually came the motor courts.
Yeah, mostly post-war, but the beginnings were there. That's where all the rooms are connected, usually in a line or a U-shape under one roof, often a central office, maybe a coffee shop attached. That became the standard motel layout we still see.
It's amazing how the buildings themselves tell the story. And the styles. You mentioned a few key ones in the sources.
Yeah, there are 3 really distinct architectural styles that pop up along Route 66 from this era. First, you've got Art Deco, or more specifically, streamlined modern.
That sleek, modern look, very 1930s.
Totally.
Yes.
Smooth surfaces, curved corners, horizontal lines, maybe some glass block. It was all about capturing the feeling of speed, movement, the machine age. Think of the U-Drop Inn in Shamrock, Texas, that iconic building from 1936, or the Coral Court Motel near St. Louis.
It looked futuristic, optimistic.
And it was relatively cheap to build during the Depression, simple shapes, not a lot of fancy decoration.
Okay, what's next?
Then, as you head further west, especially into New Mexico and Arizona, you see a lot of Pueblo Revival style.
Ah, the adobe look. Makes sense for the region.
Exactly. Big, massive-looking buildings, often with stucco over the actual structure to mimic traditional adobe. Thick walls, flat roofs, sometimes projecting wooden beams called vigas. Places like the El Vado or the Zia Motor Lodge in Albuquerque. It instantly tells you where you are, connects the business to the local landscape.
Very cool. And the third one, the one with the best name.
Right. The Ozark giraffe. You gotta love that.
What is that exactly?
It's all about using local stone. Especially in Missouri and parts of Oklahoma, builders would take flat pieces of limestone or river rock, slab rock, and embed them directly into wet cement walls. It created this really unique, textured, almost patterned veneer.
Kind of like a stone mosaic facade.
Yeah, exactly. The Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri is a famous example. It was super economical using free local materials, but it created a really distinct regional look, born out of pure resourcefulness.
So whether it was Streamlined Modern, Pueblo Revival, or Ozark Giraffe, they were all trying to get noticed.
Absolutely, because cars were moving faster now on that paved road. You had maybe seconds to catch a driver's eye. That's why you see the explosion of huge, sometimes totally over-the-top signs. Neon, flashing lights, crazy shapes.
And the giant statues. The jackrabbits, the dinosaurs, the teepees used as buildings.
Or just massive billboards like the famous "Here It Is" sign in Arizona with the arrow pointing down. Anything to make someone slam on the brakes and pull over.
It's this amazing contrast, isn't it? You have this road that exists because of very organized, top-down federal planning.
Right, a numbered highway built with government money and standards.
Lined with businesses that represent total, unrestrained, individualistic, sometimes bizarre capitalism.
Complete commercial anarchy in design. The government created the traffic flow, but the free market went wild trying to capture it.
Knowing all this history, the politics, the tough construction, the depression workers, the war mobilization, it really changes how you think about Route 66 today, doesn't it?
Completely. It stops being just this symbol of a fun road trip. You see it as this engine of massive change, especially for the West, that California population boom.
Right.
Route 66 was the pipeline. The road isn't just nostalgic. It's like a physical cross-section of 20th century American history.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together. Thinking about Route 66 specifically in that 1926 to 1945 window, what's the core significance? Why was it so pivotal then?
Well, I think you can boil it down to about 5 key things, looking back at our sources, that go way beyond just being a famous road.
Okay, lay 'em on us.
1, it was the first properly paved, reliable, all-weather highway connecting Chicago all the way to Los Angeles. It finally bridged that tough western gap.
Huge logistical achievement right there.
2, it quickly established itself as the shortest, most practical route that you could use year-round. That made it instantly attractive to the trucking industry, which was becoming incredibly important for moving goods.
Got it. Shorter, faster, more reliable for freight.
3, it was an immediate economic lifeline for hundreds of rural towns across those 8 states. It literally put them on the map, brought in outside money, and stopped them from being completely isolated.
Saved a lot of small communities.
4, it became a major artery for the New Deal. The construction itself provided jobs for thousands through the WPA and CCC, and it served as a model for how large-scale federal infrastructure projects could work.
Building the road was part of the recovery.
And 5, it was the pathway for 2 of the biggest movements of people in American history during that time. First, the Dust Bowl migration, however debated its scale, and then, critically, that enormous wartime mobilization of labor heading west. Plus, its role as a military corridor during WWII was indispensable.
So paving, trucking, rural economies, New Deal jobs, migration, and military use. That's a lot for one road.
It really shaped the country in profound ways during those 2 decades.
And even though the road itself was officially decommissioned in 1985, basically replaced by the big interstates like I-40, I-44, I-55, which were faster and more efficient for modern traffic.
Right, the very things Eisenhower had envisioned after getting stuck in the mud.
Route 66 didn't just disappear, it lives on.
It really does. Thanks to all the preservation groups, the historic designations, people keeping the memory alive. It's often described now as a linear cultural landscape. You can still drive large parts of it and see the history physically laid out.
Which brings us to that final thought, that kind of tension we talked about. We love to romanticize Route 66 as the ultimate symbol of freedom, independence, hitting the open road.
Yeah, the rebel spirit escaping the mainstream.
Its creation, its paving, its strategic importance, all that came from massive centralized government action. The Federal Highway Act, the New Deal programs, the War Department's needs.
It's a real paradox, isn't it?
So who really embodies the spirit of independence of Route 66? Is it the government visionaries like Avery or Eisenhower who forced this massive project into being for strategic reasons? Or is it the thousands of small-time entrepreneurs who threw up those quirky motels and gas stations, risking everything to capture the traffic the government sent their way?
Where does the legend truly live? in the grand plan or in the individual hustle that sprouted along its edges. It's definitely something to think about next time you see one of those iconic Route 66 shields.
Was the road built for individual freedom? Or did individual freedom just find a way to thrive on the road that was built for something else entirely?
A good question to ponder.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the real roots of the Mother Road. We hope it gave you a new perspective on this American icon. Thanks for digging in with us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Keep exploring those sources, and we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.